Hey, Miriam, thank you for coming in. You really have a great background, a lot of accomplishment in your studies and definitely amongst the top in different areas. And you won awards and had many, many different kinds of accomplishments. So we'll discuss some of that in our conversation. So thank you for coming in and doing this chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, Miriam, if you can maybe describe maybe three inflection points in your life that made you who you are today. And it could have been when you were, 3 or 5 years old. It could have been when you were 10. It could have been someone inside or outside the family, a teacher, the things that really created you to be who you are today. Can you maybe think of three?
Um, yes, probably. So one thing was that being in a family of people in engineering and science, it like I got interested in STEM fields. And another thing was that when I was in elementary school, I was a top student in class, and then my teacher um, introduced me some kind of schools in our country that were very like for special kids actually. There were very competitive entrance exams for them. And in those schools, they didn't follow the usual curriculum like other schools. They had very specific like activities, and I didn't even know about those schools. And then uh, actually, it changed my path, my life path. So I attended those schools, and I would say there were pros and cons to like having um, kids separate from others. But it made me think that like since I'm special, I must do something special and give back to the community. So it formed my personality. And after that, after I finished my bachelor's studies, I moved to the Europe and then to the US, which provided more opportunities for me. And so it was another turning point, I would say. Yeah. So um, I would say one was the family, and then the school, and then moving to um, foreign countries.
So it sounds like when you were really young, your family was kind of STEM oriented, like science and mathematics oriented. And
Yes.
so your parents or your family members were in science or in engineering?
Um, so my dad, my uncle, other family members were mostly interested in engineering. Um, and it got me interested. Like I was a curious kid. I always asked questions, and like I was really into science from the beginning.
So you were a really curious child and had a strong interest in science and things like mathematics. And you came from a family where there's engineers. So that would kind of steer you in that direction. And then you indicated when you were in school, you did really well, but you were then sort of steered into a program for people who are talented or who they perceive to have some kind of capability or talent. And you indicated that was an interesting experience for you. But then it maybe put pressure on you too, right? Because you're sort of put into a program for special people. And then you think, oh, gee, I'm going to have to try to perform in that special environment. So that create more sort of drive for you to do well and things like that?
Yes, so each of the students in that school were previously the top students themselves, but then where they all put together in school, not everyone can be the top student anymore. So it created some kind of anxiety, but on the bright side, it really motivated me to um, stay in that way. So I would say it could be sometimes toxic to have some this kind of competition and stress for children. Um, but it also worked for me to grow, actually, to um, try to stay the smart kid in class. And um, I, yeah, I used to being the top student, so I felt like I have to stay that way. Um, so now that I think about it, it might seem like unnecessary, but at that time it helped me to like not to become disappointed, but actually to try more.
Yeah, so it actually drove you to try harder, and you got these two Bachelor of Science degrees in mechanical aerospace engineering, and then graduated amongst the top students in both disciplines. So you end up in a special program, and you end up being, top student amongst the top students in both areas. So mechanical and aerospace engineering, and then you end up in the Netherlands. And tell me about what that experience was like. So you go to a different country. Did you feel uncomfortable, or did you adapt well? You're amongst students who come from all over the world in the Netherlands. What was that experience like?
So in my country, it was like it wasn't so easy for women in STEM, and we had to try more than male students to prove ourselves. Um, so the environment wasn't like equal, and I didn't like that. So I decided um, to immigrate and study in the Netherlands. And yeah, at the beginning, it was difficult to adapt to the new culture, to the language. But people were very friendly, at least the ones that I interacted with, and they really helped me to adapt to the situation. Um, and their schools was like uh, the the environment wasn't toxic like the ones that I experienced before. Everyone were encouraged, and being a top student didn't have a meaning. So everyone was valuable. Um, so it helped me realize that, yeah, my goal shouldn't be to become the first student. It should be something beyond that. Um, and actually, I see all positives except the learning a new language. Other than that, it was a really positive experience for me.
Yeah, so you ended up at Twente in the Netherlands. You get your master's in science and systems and control, specialized in robotics and applying machine learning algorithms, so medical robots and mechatronics applications. So actually, those are really useful current kind of background that you have. And then you end up doing what academic professional journey includes research and teaching roles at WHTH Icon University in Germany. What was that like?
Yeah, so after I finished my master's, I decided to move to Germany because it's a bigger country with more opportunities, and especially in the fields of automation, engineering. And I studied research in RWTH University. Um, I was interested in research, not in industry. And then I started working on computer vision projects and machine learning. Uh, it was it was really interesting at the time, especially. So right now, machine learning, large language models are really in the hype. At that time, it was, but less than now. So I was first interested in robotics, but then I started hearing about machine learning, and I took an online course first from Andrew Ng, and then I became very interested, and I decided to uh, do research in the field of computer vision in the medical field. Uh, and it felt really good because in addition to being interested in machine learning, I felt like uh, I'm being useful by contributing to the medical field, to patients probably. So it felt really good for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You contributed to innovative methods of medical image synthesis and infrastructure monitoring, and you served as a teaching assistant, instructing courses in parallel computing, computational modeling, data analysis. So, it's really quite interesting. And you were able to contribute to publications and active participation in research projects spanning AI and real-world applications. And you contributed to two invention disclosures. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So actually, before my research on computer vision, I was doing research in the field of trains and infrastructures, and I used machine learning to predict, for example, if the rail needs repair, I would say. So we could predict that, for example, at this point, there is a high pressure or high acceleration. So this part needs attention, but we used new machine learning methods with actually a smartphone. So even a passenger with their smartphone could measure signals that help eventually to predict these kinds of to predict if we need repair or more attention maintenance. And since it was very easy to use with a smartphone, it was cheap, so it got attention, and I was able to get funding at that time from um, the Ministry of Transport in Germany. And yeah, I had two inventions based on that, and it was a successful project.
So, you have this base background, and you go off for your master's, and now in the Netherlands, you end up at this German university, and you are active in machine learning and real world application, active research and publications, and you involved in this vision program for railroad infrastructure monitoring, where you got funding also from the German Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. So, and Germans are very, methodical, and they're very precise. So, for you to get that kind of funding is an indication of the talent that you have. So you're at the German university. Why did you decide to then move from Germany and then go to the States?
So actually, like you said, they are precise, and I learned a lot. Like they have a great discipline in their projects. Their work ethics is like unique, actually. Um, but the language was a barrier for me, the German language. And I realized that I'm spending more time on learning the language, but I wanted to focus more on my research. So I was thinking maybe if I'm in an environment that is English speaking, then I can fully concentrate on my research. Yeah, I like the German language, but it was just my personal choice that I wanted to do my full time on research instead of learning a new language. And it's really a difficult language, to be honest. So mostly language barriers. And then I decided to come to the US.
And then so can you tell me which school you're studying at and in the US and describe the work you're doing now in your studies?
Yes, so I'm studying at Michigan State University. Um, they have a unique program that is very interdisciplinary, computational mathematics, science, and engineering. So we have people studying in physics, mathematics, and my project is in the field of AI and large language models like ChatGPT. And actually, I'm a PhD student in my final year, and I am actively writing research papers, attending conferences, and also I'm a teaching assistant um, for the courses like Python programming and data analysis, modeling, and parallel computing.
Yeah, I mean, you're under the mentorship of Dr. Dirk Cobre, right, at MSU, the Michigan State University. As you mentioned, you're a PhD candidate in computational mathematics, science, and engineering. And your research encompasses deep learning, generative AI, computer vision, natural language processing, with a particular focus on large language models. So that, it's really interesting, especially with your original background, mechanical and aerospace engineering, and then specializing in things like robotics and machine learning for medical robotics and mechatronics applications, and then getting into the vision area and deeper medical image synthesis or rail infrastructure monitoring in Germany, and then continuing to do even more interdisciplinary kind of work at MSU. So it's really quite a broad and fascinating background. So you're there, and at MSU, you've been recognized. Can you talk about some of the different recognitions you've received at MSU and from IEEE and O'Reilly and et cetera?
Sure. So from the very first year, I got the scholarship from the engineering College of Engineering. So it was like a great start, actually. And then I continued doing my research and continued receiving multiple scholarships from MSU. And actually, thanks to my advisor, Dr. Dirk Colbrief, he was really supportive and helped me secure these scholarships. And I was awarded um, also many travel stipend. Like I applied for SC conference, like supercomputing, and they awarded me full support to travel for the conference. And then when I was in conference, there was a hackathon about machine learning, again with language models, and I was the first winner of the best originality, creativity category. And the award was by NSF, actually, National Science Foundation. And also, I attended the IEEE Global Tech Marathon. It was again coding competition about large language models. And I'm also a member of Phi Kappa Phi and Tau Beta Pi. Phi Kappa Phi is a society of like in a general society of the best students in the US. And Tau Beta Pi is similar, but for the engineering majors. And I was awarded the Love of Learning Award by Phi Kappa Phi. And what else? Yeah, multiple scholarships. I don't remember all of them, but I mentioned the most important ones. And yeah, they all helped me to focus more on my studies and don't worry about financial problems.
Well, that's quite remarkable. You know, you won numerous prestigious awards, so many that you can't even recall all of them, right? Because you've got so many of them. But what I'm hearing is from the National Science Foundation, you were recognized for your creativity and innovation. You have these different Phi Kappa Phi, or you have the Phi Kappa Phi Love of Learning Award, but there's another one as well. You have the Engineering Distinguished Scholar Fellowship at MSU. You got honors from IEEE, from O'Reilly Media as well. And you're actively mentoring undergraduate students because you're really interested in fostering collaboration, advancing research initiatives in AI. So, you know, that's a really quite interesting background, you know, in depth. You definitely are a contributor and you work hard. And you indicated that you see the landscape changing in terms of work, and I think it's global. Can you give me your perspective of how you think the landscape is changing? And for people with your background, especially top students with your background, what are some of the things that you think you will have to do to, you know, like either continue your studies or work in industry or get employment? And in your career path, so there's kind of a long sort of question, but in your career path, you want to continue in academic research or you want to go to industrial research? You know, how do you want to kind of continue after you complete your PhD? Because you're in your final term, right, for your PhDs.
Yes, I have only one more semester. So your question is about what I want to do after my PhD, or what are my suggestions to other PhD students?
Yeah, both actually. So maybe it's a three-part question. How do you see the job market? How do you see the research market? How do you see the industrial research market and the job market? And then you've got such a great background. You know, what are the things that you're doing to then plan your future? And then what would you recommend other people who are similar to you to plan their future? Because it's a complicated marketplace right now, right? So, um,
Yes, so one thing that is very important is, since everything is evolving really fast, especially in the field of AI, we should stay on top of it. We should update, and we should like grow our professional skills as they evolve really fast. So like every day, a new technology comes, we should learn about it. Otherwise, we lose the like we cannot be competent in the job market. And for example, I was working on computer vision projects at first, But then when ChatGPT became famous, I started working on large language models too. I was curious that how it works. And yeah, I took a course at MSU and learned about them. And actually, it changed a little bit my research. So I switched from computer vision to large language models since then. So one thing is that we should be updated ourselves since everything changes really fast. And like you said, the job market is not really good, both in academia and industry. So one thing that is really important is, like I said, we should be updated. And another thing is networking, actually. So the job market in Europe was different. We needed to have certificate to prove that we have knowledge of something, and networking wasn't that important. But here, um, certificates or grades aren't that important. When we want to find a job, we should prove that we have the skill, no matter we are a high school student, we have like I've seen high school students with no degree, but they are so skillful that they can secure jobs. So in here, finding a job isn't based on like paper certificate. So skills are very important and networking are very important. So people should be aware of which environment they want to find a job, to know that what the industry wants, what the academia wants, and update themselves. These are very important points. And especially in this job market, um, I think one that secure a job, they don't want to lose it because it's not easy to find another job. So it becomes especially more important to stay updated in order to be able to do their tasks. Um, did I answer all your questions, or there was another part?
Yeah, pretty much. You're indicating that the job market is there's some uncertainty in the job market because AI is infiltrating the marketplace, and now employers are wondering, should we take on more people? There was maybe too many people working in the big tech companies, and there'd be layoffs, right?
Yes.
And so there's a lot of experienced engineers and developers and scientists out there who are now looking for jobs, and it's taken them a while. And but yet people have to keep up, right? So your skills don't go out of date. So you suggested keep studying, keep active. You also indicated should network. And networking means a lot in America and in Canada, more so than, let's say, in Europe, where it's kind of like, here's a paper that kind of, you're measured more on paper. Here, you're measured on paper too, but also on your ability to just actually do the work. And you mentioned that there's like high school students who are working because they're really skilled and they have no paper. And in fact, a friend of mine who I've interviewed here, he was programming and doing research in high school, even at Berkeley, and then he got a full scholarship to Stanford. And he's in his sophomore year. He's in his second year at Stanford, and he's working at DeepMind. And
Wow.
yeah, so and he hasn't completed any degrees yet, right? And yet he's fully employed, plus going to full time in his undergraduate work. He's in his second year of his undergrad at Stanford. So that's an example where it's like he's a very good networker, very good interpersonal skills. So, and like you said, relationships, interpersonal skills, things like that can help you with your work, the networking. But he has the skills, and that's why he's employed. But he's also he's a student as well, right? So, but you have such a marvelous background, and I guess the key is to get the word out and to work your network and the network of your advisor and other friends that you have. And in fact, what I'll probably do is I'm thinking I can introduce you to this gentleman that I know who's in his second year. He's a sophomore at Stanford, but he's already working, right? And just a really great person. And I'll just check to see if he's open to it, things like that, and maybe you can just get to know each other. Or just your interests, I'm sure, would coincide with many of his interests. And then just by building that network, maybe it'll open up a possibility of something, right? So that's really good advice you gave. And let's do a little bit of exploration now. So we really talked about where your early years, the family was science oriented and engineering oriented, and that kind of was a catalyst for you to enter engineering. And so you got this aerospace and engineering degrees, and then you wanted to explore even further, expand your horizons. You got your master's in the Netherlands, and you expanded the scope of your research, and then you ended up at the German university where you expanded your research, and then you ended up in the U.S. to continue to grow and expand the areas that you're looking at. So you're very, very interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. You've studied many different areas, and as the market has changed, and you also have changed some of your research to adapt, right, to kind of the current areas, and that's why you now have started to go into this research on large language models. And of course, you've won many awards for your work. You were a top student originally, and that's how you got selected to be a top student at a top university, and you graduate the top there, and you end up, so you're just constantly excelling and doing hard work as well. So, okay, so we've got a good sort of foundation of where you are and the work that you're doing. So let's get into the future a bit. Where do you think LLMs are going? Do you think they have the capability of getting into AGI? You have like you have Leopold Aschenbrenner and Daniel Kokotailo. They've come out with papers, one about 2 years ago, one early this year, indicating that maybe we may hit some kind of AGI ASI this in 2028 or 27. You see Jan LeCun, who I interviewed earlier this year. He won the Turing Award in 2018, which is the Nobel Prize in Computing Sciences, for his work in AI, and he's the chief scientist at Meta. And he feels that LLMs won't achieve it, and he believes there has to become some kind of a world foundation model that understands physics and understands actions in a more concrete way. And yet you have another, in fact, he won the Nobel Prize last year, Jeff Hinton, who I interviewed early this year. And I think he feels that LLMs are enough. Well, that's just kind of my impression. There's enough with them and that work continuing. And he's not saying that other discoveries won't be made. He's not saying that some kind of symbolic or hybrid technologies will be evolved, but he's saying that the current path, as it progresses, that's my impression anyways, that it's enough that it could achieve some kind of ASI or AGI and within 10, 20 years, and he said could even be sooner. and he's been on the road, kind of concerned about it. So what are your views? First of all, do you think LLMs are enough to achieve ASI or AGI, so artificial general intelligence? And I'm going to use a definition a little bit different than what other people use. I'm going to say artificial general intelligence is where it's as good as the best of us, right? And I'm going to say ASI, it's better than the best of us. Okay, so no matter what field there is, it's better than the best of us. And AGI is it's as least as good as the best of us, right? But kind of like all at the same time. So, and it can generalize. You can give it normal things, and it can just react and understand. So, and then so do you think that LLMs will achieve AGI and ASI within the next 5-10 years?
So LLMs in their current state are actually they have become about just scaling them. So in order to have a better language model, they just increase the number of the parameters, their size, their training data. Yes, and because of that, they obtain better language models. But the main methodology has been mostly the same since I think 2017, that attention mechanism transformer was introduced and revolutionized this field. But since then, I haven't seen a very revolutionary idea. So it has been about scaling. So in this current state, I don't see artificial super intelligence at all. Probably AGI, but still not anytime soon. And but I believe that people like Jan LeCun that you mentioned, or others, they can revolutionize this field with new ideas. And in that case, if they find a new way of designing AI systems, then there is hope for ASI probably. But with this exact current state, I don't see ASI and probably AGI in maybe in a decade, I think. There's still a long way until we reach that state.
I mean, it's interesting, right? It's a debate because there's some people believe that it can happen, and there's others who believe it can't happen without more changes occurring. Do you use things like Gemini, Deep Research, Deep Think, or OpenAI, the deep research capability of it, where the agents, you give it a problem, then the agents take over, and it'll solve the problem, or it'll write a report, and it'll do some research for you. Have you tried some of the deep research capabilities of these tools?
Yes, I've used it for my own research. Like I wanted to know about something new. I asked Gemini to do deep research, so that I learn more about it. And actually, it was pretty good. So in a couple of no, in I think in last year, there was a lot of hallucinations in the resources that they came up with. Like it wasn't even a real paper when I clicked on it. But now it's become pretty good, and it's not perfect. Sometimes I find when I do research, I find better resources myself. But I think it's like 80% very, very good. And yeah, I was really surprised to see the capabilities. So actually, they are very good answering factual questions or searching. And yeah, and I have high expectations too. So yeah, I think specifically for deep research, they are pretty good. But sometimes for some very domain-specific questions or very technical questions that aren't like for something niche, they might be hallucinating, they might not work correctly, and they tend to agree with what we say. Like, for example, if you ask something that like, I think this is correct, what do you think? Then they always agree with you. They tend to agree with you because they have been trained to be polite with human, and because of that, they tend to always agree. So in those questions, when you ask questions like that, they aren't that reliable. But if you word it in an objective way, or for searching or factual questions, I think they are pretty good.
So, and do you use Gemini actually has a deep think capability. So it has a tool called Deep Think and has a mode called Deep Research, right? Have you tried using the Deep Think in your work at all, or?
Yes, also, so the deep thinking is based on the reasoning, like doing a step-by-step reasoning, and it is pretty good. And sometimes I switch between ChatGPT and Gemini. So I cannot say that which one is always better. Sometimes uh, this one, for some questions, this one works better. Some others, the other one. But in general, Gemini, deep thinking, and also deep research are very impressive, especially Gemini 2.5 Pro. And I've also used it for agentic workflows, um, for a task of relationship extraction, and I was able to make a system that was as good as or even better than fine-tuned models. So it's really impressive because using Gemini like that with zero shot, it hasn't been fine-tuned for that specific task that I was using, but it was able to beat the models that were specifically trained for the task. So it was really impressive.
So when you use Gemini and OpenAI, does your university get the Ultra capability? Are you using or at least for the consumers out there, there's kind of like a $25 US mode, and then there's like a $200 to $250 US kind of subscription. In the academic environment, do you get access to that kind of Ultra or Pro, the $250 capability, or are you, what kind of access do you get at the university level? Is it like just like any consumer, it's free, or it's like a paid subscription kind of model?
Yeah, they have discounts for students, and Gemini, I think it has 2 months free for students. And also discounts. Also, there's Perplexity that I was able to get for 1 year for free. So there are lots of even either free or discounted rates for students. And also our university has provided the Copilot for us. So they bought the subscription, and we use it for free. So basically, yeah, there are great platforms for us students, and they really help. The university helps us, and Also, I attended a hackathon before, and Google offered us, Google Cloud offered us $300 of compute for, and I haven't even finished it yet. It was like really enough, more than enough for my project. So yeah, there are lots of these opportunities.
Yeah, I guess you're now looking forward to Gemini 3, right? When it comes out.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to, because Gemini 2.5 was amazing,
Right.
especially Pro. So I wonder what Gemini 3 would look like.
Yeah, and there's models like Genie 3 or Genie and things like that. I mean, there's just all of these. Is there any kind of resource that you want to recommend to the audience, a particular AI that you're playing with, or it could be a video model, it could be a music model, it could be some kind of world physics thing that's out there. Maybe you played with Sakana and some of the things that they've been putting out on open source. There's Quinn from Alibaba. There's Llama from OpenAI. I'm not OpenAI, but from Meta. Um, there's some of the Microsoft stuff now. Microsoft is producing their own as well, not just the tiny models, but they're also producing bigger ones. Is there any resources that you'd recommend to people out there? So this would be like, close to the last question, then I'll ask one more question after this.
Um, so I personally really like Gemini 2.5 Pro, GPT-5 for general tasks. For coding, I really like Cursor. It also has discount for students, by the way. I also like Perplexity and Poll. Yeah, there are lots of these in the market. But these were my personal preferences. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Gemini 2.5 Pro is very good. I use it as well, but I use OpenAI, and I have their Pro model, so I get so the deep research is the agent mode. There's Pulse that just came out, which I think is interesting, and then I use deep research quite a bit. I use the deep research capability between OpenAI and Gemini. So sometimes I'll do the initial deep research within OpenAI, and then I'll go to Gemini and say, verify everything in what was produced, and then rewrite the report based on your verification. And then what I'll do is I'll put it back to OpenAI again, so it's like edition 1, which is a report, feed into GPT or Gemini Pro, deep research, verifying, and then rewriting. And then I put it back again to OpenAI to verify and rewrite. And then what I do in the final report is then I'll use the OpenAI Pro deep thinking mode, which is not deep research, but it's really good. And then I'll take each piece within this, now let's say 50-page report, and just plug in just this one section and say, take a look at this, verify, and then confirm and expand if something's missing, and then rewrite it. And then I find that's even better. And so, and then I find it's pretty clean. So,
Yeah, actually, you just gave me an idea to make a system like one agent based on Gemini, one agent based on GPT, and then they discuss and debate with each other, iterate. Then I think they will come up with something great. Yeah.
so you're gonna create that agentic little tool.
Yes, probably. You just gave me this idea. I think it would be great. Yeah, I want to try it.
And what I do is once it creates a fairly lengthy report, I realize that then it gets into a context window problem, right? So then what I do is I take that third edition of the report and I'll just take a portion, just a really small portion of it, and I'll do a prompt where I say verify, do additional research, and then I say write a corrected version of just this small segment, and I use the OpenAI Pro, the deepest thinking mode Pro without going into deep research, and I find it's even better than deep research if you just do a small portion, and then so I just work through the document, replacing each section now with this updated research, and when I do that, I find it's very clean, it's accurate, in other words. And I find that it's even deeper in terms of its insights that it's giving, right? So, and if you codify that, that would be a great tool to have. It's almost like the Microsoft AI Diagnostic Orchestrator, which is, or there's the M2N2 from Sakana, right? Or there's the multimodal adaptive branching multicolour search, which Sakana has produced as well, where there's the chorus of agents, right? And they compete and they chat, and then you get better results. But if you can create that into a kind of like a general research tool, that'd be and make it available.
Yes, I don't know if it's already there, but if not, I'm definitely going to create it. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. In fact, people would be able to use that. That'd be really useful for them.
Yes.
So I have one more question, Maryam, and that is, what recommendations do you want to leave the audience?
So for like, for example, for students or for general? Yes.
Could be anything. It's open.
So one thing for maybe female students is that usually in the STEM fields, they are still male dominated. And for example, I've been in classes with like 40 male students and I was the only female student. So my suggestion is like, don't be intimidated or don't be afraid. Just I really hope that I can be some kind of role model for um, little girls who are interested in STEM. So I think that was really important for me to not to be afraid of like asking questions in a class full of male students, or yeah, I think that is very important, because yeah, as I said, this field is still male dominated, and I think women's idea are very valuable. We need them. So yeah, I'm really encouraging them to become active, not to be afraid, and yeah. So mostly for female students.
So Maryam, thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with the audience. And you really have an exceptional background, and you're doing outstanding work. And I appreciate you taking the time this morning to share with our audience. So
thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate your help. It was a pleasure for me to talk to you today.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.